In the last video, we saw how the trauma of World War I and the failed beer hall putsch shaped the political outsider, Adolf Hitler. He learned a crucial lesson. Germany is not conquered by a coup, but through the ballot box. In the late 1920s, despite its propaganda fervor, the NSDAP was a fringe phenomenon. Germany was experiencing a brief period of stability, but then an event struck the world that shook the fragile Weimar Republic to its core and opened the door to power for Hitler. This is the story of crisis, propaganda, and the fatal intrigues of the conservative elite that brought Hitler to the top in 1933. In October 1929, the New York Stock Exchange collapsed. It was the starting signal for the Great Depression, and it hit Germany harder than almost any other country. Germany was heavily dependent on loans from the US. When these funds were recalled, the economy instantly collapsed. Millions of people lost their jobs. The unemployment rate soared to over 30%. 1 in 3 Germans was out of work. The crisis radicalized the population. People no longer sought complex solutions, but a scapegoat and a savior. The established parties of the Weimar Republic, divided and unable to agree on a common economic policy, lost all credibility. The NSDAP ascended like a balloon during this crisis. Hitler's propagandists promised work, bread, and the restoration of national honor. In the Reichstag elections of 1930, the NSDAP suddenly became the second largest party. The path to the top was now clearly laid out. Hitler's success was no accident, but the result of brilliant, ruthless propaganda. His propaganda chief, Joseph Goebbels, understood how to use modern mass media to spread the ideology. Hitler was no longer just staged in beer halls, but was presented throughout the entire media landscape as a non-partisan figure of salvation. For this, he needed influential allies in the press. This is where powerful publishers and industrialists came into play. One of the most prominent was the media mogul Alfred Hugenberg, whose media conglomerate controlled a large portion of the national conservative press in Germany. Hugenberg opened the doors to millions of readers for Hitler and provided him with funding. The publishing house Bertelsmann, at that time still a medium-sized company focusing on religious literature and book clubs, also played a role. While Bertelsmann was not part of Hugenberg's conglomerate, they opportunistically adapted to the political mood and published increasingly National Socialist and war-glorifying books. During the Ascent, and especially after the seizure of power, the goal was to secure their own business existence and profit from the nationalist trend, which brought the publisher large print runs and profits. Through these powerful partnerships, the ideology was carried into every corner of the country. NS propaganda was omnipresent. While Hitler publicly advocated the legal path to power, the SA Sturmabteilung dominated the streets with raw violence. The SA, led by Ernst Röhm, was a million-strong army of the unemployed, disappointed ex-soldiers, and young men who found an outlet for their rage in the SA. They intimidated political opponents, disrupted meetings, and spread terror. This street terror served a dual purpose. First, it demoralized the political opponents of the Weimar Republic. Second, it created a sense of chaos and lawlessness among the middle-class population. The NSDAP could then present itself as the only force capable of ending this disorder, naturally with a strong leader. The Communist Party and the Social Democrats were also heavily involved in street battles, but they were internally divided and could barely counter the organized brutality of the SA. Despite his electoral success, Hitler was never able to gain an absolute majority. His appointment as Chancellor on January 30, 1933, was not a democratic triumph, but the result of intrigues by the conservative elites. The main players were Reich President Paul von Hindenburg. The elderly field marshal and war hero deeply despised the Bohemian corporal Hitler. Franz von Papen, a nobleman and former chancellor who was protected by Hindenburg. Kurt von Schleicher, the general and also former chancellor who tried to divide the political camps. After von Schleicher failed, Franz von Papen convinced Reich President Hindenburg. Papen's plan was fatal in its arrogance. They would appoint Hitler as chancellor, but frame and control him with a cabinet of conservative nobles and ministers. Von Papen himself was to become vice-chancellor and believed he could easily maneuver Hitler. On January 30, 1933, Hindenburg finally gave in. Hitler was appointed chancellor. The conservatives believed they had turned the National Socialist fire into a useful torchbearer. They were catastrophically wrong. They had opened the door to the wolf. Hitler's ascent was complete, but his power was not yet absolute at this point. He controlled only a few cabinet positions. Democracy had not yet been defeated, but what Hitler did in the following weeks was a textbook example in the rapid and brutal destruction of democratic structures. In the next video, we will see how Hitler consolidated power in just a few months. The Reichstag fire as a pretext for suspending fundamental rights, the enabling act that ended democracy, and the ruthless Gleichschaltung, coordination of all areas of society. Don't miss video 3, Reign of Terror and War.